Good morning, everyone. Welcome into another edition of First Take. Jen Latta here holding it down for Molly. And, of course, we have the big guns, Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman. Oh, that's right. High five over here, fist bump over here. See, I've already learned so much about you.
This is what you do. This is what you do.
That's all there is to us, really. There's not much more.
Yeah, exactly. That's the extent of it. Big night in the NBA, of course, because we have the NBA draft. We have tons of information and late-breaking stuff on that, so don't go anywhere because we will get into all of that a little later in the show. But we have to start with this. It turns out that the rumor that sent shockwaves across the association is actually true. Phil Jackson confirming last night that the Knicks are, in fact, listening to trade offers for Kristaps Porzingis. Take a listen.
You know, as much as we value Kristaps and, you know, what he's done for us, when a guy doesn't show up at an exit meeting, everybody starts speculating on, you know, the duration or his movability from a club. So we've been getting calls, and, you know, we're listening, but we're not intrigued yet at this level. But as much as we love this guy, you know, we have to do what's good for our club.
Stephen A., your reaction to that?
You know something? I'm trying to keep my cool. I really, really am, you know. We're not, vacation is not far off, and I haven't had a vacation in quite a long time. And I really, really wanted to end this week on a high note, and then this man, Phil Jackson, sits there and contaminates my mind, contaminates the city of New York City. This man is an unmitigated disaster as an executive. We all know that he's one of, if not the greatest coach ever. We have to give him credit and deference in regards to that. He's an 11-time champion. I am not here to question that man's basketball knowledge. He has forgotten more basketball than most of us know. I totally understand and respect that.
He's apparently forgot a lot of basketball, period.
But as an executive, as a leader, it's not that he's forgotten, Max. You're wrong about that. It's that he doesn't care because it pales in comparison to his agendas and his ego. And that's really what's going on here. Kristaps Porzingis doesn't show up for an exit interview. Why? Because he looks at Phil Jackson messing with Carmelo Anthony throughout the season. He knows that Phil Jackson is not coming to road games. He knows that Phil Jackson is messing with the coaches, trying to implement a system they barely even know and the players are barely even interested in. They know all of this stuff. You don't have to be 30 or 40 years of age with 10-plus years in this business to know what's going on. And so as a result, Porzingis said, enough's enough. The dysfunctionality that has been reeking through this franchise or sifting through this franchise like a virus, it's enough. I can't sit back and take it anymore. Through his brother Giannis, who obviously is his guy, even though Andy Miller is his representative, Giannis works for Andy Miller, and the only reason he works for Andy Miller because that's the only reason Andy Miller was going to get Porzingis as his client. So with all of that being said, here is what we have. We have a situation where Phil Jackson doesn't give 2 cents about the Knicks and their success. He is 80-166 as the executive for the New York Knicks in year 4, and he is talking about starting over. You can't make this stuff up. And so now I have to think about a remedy because I'm looking at some of the moves, and Max, I know because we both got the list in front of us in terms of the moves that Phil Jackson has made. I'm going to do you a favor, my brother. I'm going to leave it to you because if it comes out of my mouth, and I sit up there and I literally articulate the stuff that this man has done since he has been the executive of the New York Knicks, I'm going to lose my mind. I ain't going to be able to do the rest of the show. I'm telling you right now. It comes out of my mouth. I'm not going to be able to control myself because I'm barely able to right now. But I will tell you this. I have a radio show in New York and L.A. and nationwide on ESPN Radio. And I promise all of y'all you think I'm going to go off now? It's just some stuff that I don't even know what I'm going to do. Come 1 o'clock Eastern Time, 10 o'clock West Coast Time. I don't know what I'm going to do when I'm talking about this man, but I do know I'm going to say this. It is time that we turn our attention to Mr. James Dolan. And here's why. The only reason Phil is there is because he provides cover for a man who is going to have to deal with Knicks fans protesting outside of Madison Square Garden because they wanted Dolan gone because of how inept this franchise was. Dolan hires Phil Jackson, and then the only time we have heard James Dolan's name since was when the Charles Oakley scandal went down, when he got into that beef with the security at Madison Square Garden because he was going at Dolan. That's the only time we've spoken about Dolan ever since he hired Phil Jackson. All the attention has been given to Phil. It has provided cover for Dolan. Maybe if we strip that cover off Dolan, he will sit there and get rid of Phil. That is our only hope at this moment in time. Max, the floor is yours.
Well, let's start with Dolan, actually. I'm going to get to Phil in a second. He just extended Phil Jackson.
2 more years.
He extended Phil Jackson.
He had a 5-year deal, had an option after 3. Both had an option. Go ahead.
What blows my mind, it blows my mind. How dare Phil Jackson, how dare you sit there and say we have to do what's right for the Knicks? What makes you think, why do you presume to know what's best for the Knicks? The Knicks had won 127 games in the 3 years previous to Phil Jackson's arrival. 2 years before he got there, they won 54 games.
Yeah.
They were a playoff team. They slipped a
under
bit.
Mike Woodson as the coach.
That's right. They slipped a bit and only won 37 games, which if Phil Jackson could now coach this team to 37 wins, it'd be a miracle. Or, excuse me, GM, president, whatever,
President of
operate
basketball
this team
operations.
to 37 wins, it would be a miracle. They go from 127 wins over 3 seasons to 80 wins over 3 seasons. They were over 15 games worse a year, and they weren't that good to begin with. And he just got extended, and why are they worse? I'm going to talk a lot about this in my final take today. So I'm going to leave his ego alone for a second, because that's what's going to get it later. They're worse because of he's doctrinaire, meaning he believes in the kind of theory of his triangle offense to the exclusion of any other idea. All personnel decisions are now made based on how they can run the triangle, this outdated offense that has been shown empirically to be inferior to modern offenses in this modern NBA with these NBA rules. Inferior, Phil. I know you've forgotten, as Stephen A. said, more basketball than I'll ever know. But this much we can say. The triangle offense in the modern NBA is inferior to modern offenses, period. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. All the evidence says the same thing. Not some of it, all of it. So the fact that he insists on running his personnel through that metric and making trades like Tyson Chandler for nothing. He got nothing for Tyson Chandler. Jose Calderon, the remains of Jose Calderon, are you serious? He got nothing for Tyson Chandler. He got nothing for J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert. In fact, he used Iman Shumpert to get out of a relatively inexpensive J.R. Smith contract. They both became real contributors to a championship team. He has now devalued Carmelo Anthony to the point where you're talking about, Stephen A., you're hearing they could just cut him. Carmelo Anthony, he has virtually no trade value, where a couple years ago, if you would ask, hey, Boston, you want Carmelo Anthony? We'll take, some high draft pick, some other good thing you have, and maybe Jay Crowder, and maybe we'll think about it. And now you can't give Carmelo Anthony away. And finally, he is now alienating the 7'3", 21-year-old, rim-protecting, athletic, three-point shooting franchise cornerstone.
Okay.
He is, as I said yesterday, as an executive, hot garbage, and he needs to go.
I really didn't want to go here. I really didn't. I'm going to try to keep my composure. But just looking at the list, let me just throw out a few moves that Phil Jackson made. I'm not going to tell you who he moved away. I'm going to tell you who he acquired since he arrived in 2014. Jose Calderon, Samuel Dallenberg, Shane Larkin, Wayne Ellington, 2 second-round picks.
The Tyson Chandler move.
Drafted a Cle Anthony early, and
I didn't mind that.
All right, I didn't mind that at all. Okay. Quincy AC and Travis Outlaw. Let's continue forward. Lou Edmondson, Alex Girk, Cavs second-round pick, Lance Thomas. By the way, Lance Thomas, the numbers that he's getting paid right now, Lance Thomas, $6 million, $6.5 million, $7.1 million, $7.5 million. Let me finish. Okay, let's go to wait for March time. All right, he drafted Kristaps Porzingis, right? Jerry and Grant. Willie Hernan Gomez. I like him though.
Gomez is a good acquisition.
I liked him. Joakim Noah, 4-year, $72.5 million deal. Courtney Lee, 4-year, $48 million deal. And by the way, his very first move as the executive was to sign Lamar Odom, who was on crack.
Wait, who? Phil or Lamar? Phil or Lamar?
I don't mean to be. Listen,
distinction.
I love Lamar Odom, the person, and God bless him. We're wishing nothing but the best. But metaphorically speaking, he saw his first move as the executive of the New York Knicks was to sign Lamar Odom, who was on crack.
Well, how about this, Stephen A?
Look, man, I mean, you got to be kidding me.
How about this? How about this? What's the Knicks' problem right now? They have a deadweight contract in the form of Joakim Noah on the books. Talk about unforced errors. I talked about this from the Lakers front office. Jim Buss and Mitch Kupchak, Mozgov and Lou Aldang to these outrageous contracts. It's so stupid. Now they have to use assets to move them off the books. Talk about an unforced error. Everyone knew that Joakim Noah was done. He gave him a $72 million deal. It's an albatross. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's about assets and liabilities. Nothing but a liability. And if the argument is, well, you don't understand, behind the scenes, Derrick Rose really wanted to play with Joakim Noah, so once we made the Robin Lopez, et cetera, deal for Derrick Rose, we kind of had to sign Joe. Even if that's the case, well, then your analysis of what would make the team better was idiotic because it clearly didn't help. So, well, we thought with Joakim Noah, if it helped us get Derrick Rose, how did that turn out? Phil, at a certain point, you have to look at the record and ask yourself, are you good at or bad at what you're doing? You're terrible. You're the worst.
Listen, back to Lamar Odom. My heart goes out to him. I wish him nothing but the best because I got a lot of love for him. One of the best people that I know. He never played the game for the New York Knicks. I just mentioned that because just from a subliminal perspective, your first move was to sign that dude with all of those problems that he had. We should have known then what a disaster Phil Jackson would be. He doesn't talk to many people. He doesn't scout. He doesn't take road trips. The lazy doesn't begin to describe his tenure over the New York Knicks. I mean,
But he may have, in fairness about that Lamar Odom signing and many of these moves, it may be the case. It may be the case.
Are you telling me that he has zero responsibility to test the waters with a guy like Kristaps Porzingis? Are you saying that he's so untouchable that when people were calling, inquiring about Kristaps, because he was saying that it was because he skipped, right, people were making calls.
No, the Knicks are making calls.
The Knicks are not making calls.
It's been reported repeatedly that they're also making calls.
And in his statement last night, he said, we're getting calls.
Yeah, they're receiving calls.
So that's my question is, do they have a responsibility to field those calls?
I'll tell you why that's nonsense stuff put out by Phil's people to try to make it seem like he's not completely incompetent. Well, don't you have to listen? How stupid do you think we are, really? Look at the context of what's going on. Kristaps Porzingis skips the exit interview because he obviously hates Phil, because everyone hates playing there. They can't talk to any free agents because no one wants to play for a dysfunctional franchise. It starts with Dolan, a fish rots from the head down, but Phil is largely responsible now for the culture there. So Kristaps is like, I don't even want to deal with this guy, and then all of a sudden they're fielding calls from other teams, and we have to listen to Kristaps to offers from Kristaps. We see what this is.
Let's end the segment this way. He's receiving calls. The reason why it's important to highlight that is because even though Porzingis skipped the exit interview, if you return Phil's phone calls thereafter, a lot of this is squashed. But he stays away from Phil. He doesn't want anything to do with Phil. Exactly. So the point is he stays away from Phil, and his brother has basically, just controlled the proceedings per se. And they're trying to downplay it, but they don't want to talk to Phil. So that's what has Phil so upset. The other point is we have to look at Steve Mills. He is the general manager, but here's the big thing. I know that the buck stops with Phil Jackson. Damn it, that ain't good enough. Steve Mills used to be the president of Madison Square Garden. He's somebody that Dolan likes and respects. He's got to get in Dolan's ear to influence some kind of change rather than tolerate this nonsense.
And as we referenced yesterday, at the very least, Phil has a responsibility to repair, or at least begin to repair, the relationship with Kristaps. Let's move on. What the heck is going on in Cleveland? Sources tell our Brian Windhorst that Chauncey Billups has been offered a long-term contract to be the president of basketball operations, but that Billups is conflicted about accepting that job. When you couple that with the report in the Chicago Sun-Times that says that Cavs players have told Jimmy Butler to stay away from the organization, using words like volatile to describe it, what is going on there? Now,